How's it going, Internet? I'm Jasmine and welcome to my channel. I've been really inspired by some amazing people on YouTube lately, and they make repaint dolls and they're just beautiful. So I thought, why don't I do that? But then I got stuck because I couldn't think of anything original and new that inspired me. And then it hit me. There's this app called Love Nikki. It's a dress-up game and I've been obsessed with it for about a year now. There's so many outfits and beautiful dresses and I just wanted to cosplay them. But then I thought, why not just make them in miniature? It'd be cheaper and it'd be fun, so that's what I did. I won't really go too much into the game as I'm not sponsored by them and I don't really know if I'm allowed to do that, but I highly recommend it. It's really fun and it's really good. Anyway, I decided to start with Valentine's Day and I chose this cute little set. I plan to work my way up to the more elaborate ones, but for now, this is cute. So I intended to have a before and after where I showed you the Draculara that I used, but I actually lost all the footage for that, unfortunately. So I don't really have a before, but here's the after. I'm using Epoxy Sculpt to make her shoes, and I'm very excited because I just got it in the mail and I can't wait to use it, and I don't actually have any plastic gloves, so I'm risking my fingers at the moment, but I think they'll be fine, hopefully. So originally I was going to have them removable, that's why I put plastic on her feet. But unfortunately I changed my mind at the last second and decided to make it more permanent, partially because I just couldn't work with the plastic, but mostly because I don't think I'm going to take these shoes off anyway, so I thought it would be easier for a beginner, and this is my first time using Epoxy Sculpt, which is probably very obvious, but I'm doing my best, and I did know that if I ever got stuck and I put things in the wrong place or I needed it to be a bit smoother, then I could always get some water. So I would use some Q-tips with some water on the end of it just to fix up some little mistakes here and there. In the end, I spent so long on the one shoe that the Epoxy Sculpt that I'd pulled out for the other shoe had practically dried completely, so I was so upset. And I did manage to use it in the end, but only just barely, and it ended up with almost a completely different shape to the other shoe. I was really frustrated, but I decided to just leave it alone. I then started on her leggings. Again, originally I was going to make some and actually have them removable, but because I put the shoes on first, I ended up having to change everything and just paint them on. And I was like, well, looks like I'm going to paint them now, so that's what I did. I actually put some glitter in the paint as well, just to give it a little extra bit of shine, and I'm really glad I did that because it made it look like those shiny leggings that you put on, which was really fun. It did take a little while to paint in the end. I had to do a couple of layers at least. I'm pretty sure I did 3. If there was one thing I could change, I would probably have scratched up the skin first or put on some Mr. Super Clear so it had something to stick to. I didn't really think about it at the time, but there are bits and pieces that like to chip off here and there, which is really frustrating, but you know, you live and learn. And then there were these tiny little letters. They were so small and I was terrified because I was afraid I was going to screw them up and then have to redo them, and I was like, oh no! But in the end, I got really lucky and I got them on the first go, and I was just super careful and so happy with it. And now for this tiny little heart, but it was so small, and again I was so scared that I was going to mess it up, but then I was like, no, I can do this, I can do this. And then you'll actually see I actually got it again on my first go, and I nearly went back to fix it because I thought it wasn't right. But then I stopped myself and was like, no, it's fine. If you do any more, you'll make it worse. And now on to the shoes. I actually had to mix the colours quite a bit in order to get the right one. I started off with this one that I thought was right, and then it wasn't. I had to remix it, and it's just very frustrating because I was trying to match the colour that's underneath these, and you can't really see it on the camera. In the end, I did find this one colour that I was really happy with, and I made sure to water it down so it stayed nice and smooth once I finished painting. The good thing about painting is that if you're waiting for it to dry, you can always go and do other projects that you're working on, so I was able to get some of my quilting done, which I was really happy about. And now onto the scary black paint. I was really cautious and freaked out because I was scared I was going to get it wrong. You can't really go backwards with black. I also had to go up the sides of the shoe a little bit, as you can see, so I was really freaking out and trying to get it right in the first go. I think I did in the end. And now onto the tiny little bows for her shoes. They're really small, and if there's one thing I've learnt from making bows, it's that always make them smaller than you think, because the second you put it up against the doll to size compare, you're like, oh my god, it's like 5 times too big, so always make it smaller. This was actually quite hard to sew. I actually had to use the table, as you can see here, to push the needle through sometimes. It's so small, but it was so thick. In the end, I actually used the thread to wrap around the ribbon in order to keep it closed rather than make a separate one. I thought it would be easier and cuter, and it was. So I used some fabric glue to stop the thread from going anywhere. This glue is really old though, so I actually had to use the end of a paintbrush in order to pull it out and then stick it onto it. It's nearly dried up, but I'm determined to use it all before it dies. I made sure to chop any loose threads that had been left over. Looking at it now, I can see one that I missed on the other bow, but I just didn't notice it at the time, so never mind. We'll move on. Oh, and here's the finished product. What do you think? Onto the dress. Now I found this ribbon at my local Spotlight. I was really happy with it because not only is it stretchy, but it has the perfect ends to make some little frills. Unfortunately, it is the wrong colour though, so I had to paint it a little bit, just to make it better. I made sure to paint both sides as well, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it all, and that would be a disaster. And now onto the dress. So I first copied the design onto some paper just to give me an idea of the scale, and then I basted a piece of fabric right through the middle, or well, close to the middle, just to give me an idea of where the waistline was going to be, and that way I'd know where to put the drawings and the paintings. I started with this long, swirly musk stick, I think they are. I'm just guessing. It's on the pattern, so that's what I did. I tried to use highlights, so white and darker pinks, in order to give it a little bit more depth. Here's where I started the base for the candies. I just used the white, that way when I painted the colours over the top, they'd stand out a little bit more and be a little brighter. I made a lot of swirlies in order to make the giant lollipops and the candies and the hearts and the stars and the jelly beans, and there were so many little bits and bobs and pieces. It took a while, but I think it was worth it. They came out really cute. I made sure I only painted with one colour at a time. That way I could make sure where I wanted that colour to go so that I wouldn't oversaturate it with too many pinks or too many blues, too many golds, whatever. I think it ended up pretty good in the end. What do you think? The next step, of course, is to gather the basting. It took a little while and I was really sad because I was covering up all that painting that I'd just done, but I knew that it would all show up in the end. I also left specific places quite blank and scarce. That way I could have those in the back and bring forward the ones I really liked. I actually glued the top gathers down. That way I could put them specifically in the places that I wanted them to go and they wouldn't move around too much. If I didn't, they were just kind of all over the place and she would have flashed everyone. That wouldn't be good. I also used my fingers just to press the edges of the bottom down. They didn't really need to be glued down or anything because I knew they'd have the frill on them in the end. This was just to give me an idea of where the shapes were going to be, and so I could cheat and put forward the ones that I liked and didn't like. Hide the mistakes, if you will. And there it is. What do you reckon? I think it's pretty sweet. Pun intended. I then put it up to the doll for size comparisons. I made sure the waist was where I wanted it to sit, and then I just cut down anything extra. I then used my fray stopper again just to make sure that the edges didn't go anywhere. It's pretty good stuff. It's almost like glue, except when it dries it's completely clear and you can't see it in the fabric at all. As you can see here, you can't see any of the fray stopper at all. I then glued down the frills, and again I'm trying to use all I can of this fabric glue. It's so dry and it's almost dead, but I just want to make sure that I can use it. It still works. None of the None of the frill has fallen off, it's still working just fine. So I will use it to the end, damn it! It's all coming together now. All it needs now is the little bow. Oh, don't look at the back. So I folded over and then folded over again as almost like a binding, just to make sure that you couldn't see any rough edges. In the end it was too wide, and I fixed it later, but for now it looked fine. It's not until I put it against the door. Again, like I said, always triple double check and make it smaller than you would think, because it's just tiny. So here I am fixing it 3 times to make sure that it's small enough. It would have been massive otherwise. That's not to say that you should instantly go for the smaller option. You should really start with bigger if you can. But if you want to save some time, just kind of go with the instinct. Go, that's the right size. Don't go, I'll make it smaller, I'll make it bigger. Just go, that looks about right. And then compare, and you'll probably have to make it smaller. Using the same method on the bows that I used on the shoes, I just stitched a couple of pieces here and there, you know, just to make sure it doesn't fall apart. Here's where I made the middle of the bow. I had to actually cut it down again because it was just too wide, but that's okay. I did have to iron it though, and that was very hard, and it was bloody hot, so that was nearly very dangerous. Perfect. I love it. Finally I put some fray stopper on the bow just to make sure that it doesn't come unraveled. And now to glue down the waistband. Oh, I can't believe that glue actually worked. It's so dry. And here's where I've sewn it together at the back. I used the smallest stitch option on my sewing machine in order to make the stitches really tiny. That way, when it opens up, if you pull it apart, you can't see between the seams. I actually used some command strips, some old ones. They have this velcros that you can stick to the wall, and they work really well, but once you don't need to hang anything there anymore, you just kind of lose the sticky part and you're stuck with all this little velcro stuff. So I thought, perfect! They'd make a great little velcro for the back of this dress. I wanted to sew them on, but they're so plasticky that I just went for the fabric glue in the end. And now onto the skirt. I used the same method as I did for the dress, and I painted it white instead for the extra little bit of thrill. It's got thrill. I keep saying thrill instead of frill. The extra bit of frill on the bottom. I made sure that the bottom was as white as it could possibly be, because that was the part that you're really going to see. I painted up further just to make sure that you couldn't actually see the silver through the fabric. As you can see, I've basted the fabric like I have in all the past ones. I tied a little knot in the end of the thread and then gathered it all up again. Once I'd gathered it, I made sure that it was all straight and neat and tidy, and that way it'd be easier for me to sew it in at the sides. Before I did that though, I put it up against the doll to make sure that it was the right space, the right size and the right width. I actually put it really low on her waist so that it wouldn't puff up the dress too close to her waist. Here's where I put it on the lowest setting. You can see it can go from 1, it goes all the way up to 5, which is what the basting stitch is, but down to 1 is the small set stitch. I haven't actually altered the speed of this video. I wanted you to see just how tiny these little stitches are. It takes forever to get to the end because it's just moving at the snail's pace. Like I said, I haven't changed the speed of this particular part of the video. that is the actual pace it goes when it makes those tiny little stitches. And here's where I've fixed up the edges. They looked awful, so I knew that they were wrong, but that's fine. And then I nearly screwed it all up and I was so upset. Thankfully I fixed it though, so it's all good. I then used this very small corded elastic in order to go around the waist. I used fabric glue to fold over the hem so that I'd be able to move the elastic around inside it. I actually ended up pulling the basting stitch out altogether, so it was fine. It was just earlier than I would have liked it to be. I then cut some more white fabric into strips and then basted them and gathered them a little bit and glued them down. And finally, here's where I'm adding the frill. Easy mistake would be to put it on the wrong side, but thankfully I managed to think ahead for once. Once it was done, I actually really liked the way that it looked. Just upside down, it looked like a skirt in and of itself. So maybe I'll use the ribbon again in the future, just to make a skirt all on its own. Here's where I cut off the excess and then glued it down. Cutting off more excess. And now onto the very fiddly accessories. This took forever. I got a pin and then I actually chopped it up so that I could make a little bauble on the end, as big as it was. I used my E6000 glue to make the actual little earring piece, and it actually worked really well. I was rather surprised. I did have to do a lot of fiddling and wait for it to dry to a certain amount and then actually fiddle and play around with it in my fingers just to make sure that it wouldn't stick to everything. But it worked out really well. I used the same method to make the little beads on the chain. I found this tiny little chain at Spotlight and I thought, perfect! But it didn't have anything extra on it and I couldn't find the right colour or the right size beads, so I ended up making my own, again using the glue. Some of them I attached to the end of the safety pin because it was just easier, and other ones I was able to just flip them off and take them off completely. In the end I did take them off the safety pins altogether, but at the time they were just too stubborn and they were sticking to it. So many little tiny balls. I also made a little diamond shaped one, and that was really hard. Then used some paints, just some acrylic paints, just to make them the colours that I wanted them to be. It was silver, and black, and red. And here they are. It took a really long time, a lot of patience and effort and glue and energy, and I finally managed to stick them all down to the actual chain. And then it took even more patience and glue and energy in order to get them onto the actual doll. The bracelet was so small, the necklace was barely on, and it was so tiny. And there's the earrings, you can just see them hiding behind her hair there. I've also attached a little bow to her hair. I've also actually glossed her eyes since you last saw her and added some eyelashes, but again, I just kind of lost all that footage and I didn't really want to add some random footage in and didn't even see the original part of it. And now it's time to dress her up. Careful, careful. Oh, I put it on backwards. Damn it. So one day I'll probably go back and remake it, but for now it's as good as I can get it and I'm happy with it. Okay, so looking on the page I realised that it's called the Festival in Wonderland, so I decided to name her Alice. I thought it was pretty appropriate. If there was one thing I would have to change, it would probably be her hair and her dress. The hair in the original is just a lot flatter and smoother and neater and nicer, and at the moment my skill just doesn't match up to that. Again, the dress was just a little too long in the end. I wish I'd made it shorter, but I just didn't think about it at the time. I actually didn't do this on purpose, but I actually made her so that she could stand on her own, and I just kind of stood her up, not expecting her to actually stay there, and then she did, and I was like, oh my god, what did I do? So it was really exciting. Again, this game is just so cute, and there's so many nice ones that I want to make. If you do play the game, and you have a request that you would like me to make, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you. If you don't like to comment on YouTube, or you just kind of want to see pictures and you don't want to watch the full video, I've also got an Instagram account that I specifically use for my dolls. So I'll pop all the pictures up over there, and if you want to comment down there, I'd love that too. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then please feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.